Fear is the most powerful motivator in the world. And we saw in 2020 and 2021 how fear makes people do very irrational things. You become impulsive, easy to manipulate. And that's how cancer patients are treated. When you have cancer every day, you're dealing with fear, and it's real. It's real fear. It's not fear being projected on you by the media, but real threat. You have a life-threatening illness.
You beat cancer holistically. My dearest friend died last year. She was doing so well and fighting holistically too. But it was interesting to follow her journey from the inside of someone that went out and sought out the best holistic health in the world. I learned a ton from her. Some of the greatest people I've ever met figure out how to turn pain into purpose. They're leaving a mark. They're helping humanity. And here you are, written 3 books, helping countless people that are going through the most difficult times ever. But you're opening up so many minds, to really consider how they're living their lives right now.
There's a lot of corruption in the cancer and medical and pharmaceutical industries. Many of these cancer studies and statistics are exaggerated, and the effectiveness of treatments is greatly exaggerated. Patients are not asking the right questions. They don't get enough information from their doctors. They're led into treatment out of fear and ignorance.
You were definitely a prime example of someone that's really living in a beautiful purpose. God, I love it. All right. Well, thank you Chris for joining us today. This podcast called Man on a Mission. We kind of seek out people in the marketplace that are living in their purpose. They have missions and they're actively involved with their mission. They're actually living it out. So it's really cool to have you on. I've been following your journey for a while. I can't wait to really actually get your story firsthand. But you're going to have to go through the details. But basically, to my knowledge, you beat cancer holistically. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Yeah. We've all been affected by someone that had cancer. I lost my grandma to cancer. My dearest friend died last year of cancer. Built quite a name for herself too. And her battle ended tragically being septic after having kidney stones. It was kind of a hard end because she was doing so well and fighting holistically too. And she had a really big public name, but she was living that battle out loud. But it was interesting to follow her journey from the inside of someone that went out and sought out the best holistic health in the world. I learned a ton from her. Be kind of cool interesting to sort of pair your journey up with that, Chris. But if you don't mind, with our audience, maybe just start and share where it started for you with cancer, and we can kind of dive in from there.
Sure. Yeah, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26 in December 2003. So, it was like a pretty big shock for a 26-year-old.
Totally.
To get a cancer diagnosis. And leading up to that, I'd been having abdominal pain and for the better part of a year and didn't know what it was. And eventually went to the doctor and had a colonoscopy, and that's where they found a golf ball sized tumor in my colon, and was told I needed surgery to get it out of me before it would spread and kill me. And like most cancer patients, I was clueless about the disease, and I was rushed into treatment out of fear. And fear is the most powerful motivator in the world. And we saw in 2020 and 2021 how fear makes people do very irrational things. Fear makes people do things against their own best interest because they're desperate for safety and protection. And when you're in a state of fear and stress, worry, anxiety, panic, you cannot think clearly or rationally. You become impulsive and easy to manipulate. And that's how cancer patients are treated. And I even tweeted this back in, 2020 when everything started going down. I said, now the world knows how cancer patients feel with all the fear mongering going on. Because when you have cancer every day, you're dealing with fear, and it's real, right? It's real fear. It's not fear being projected on you by the media every day. It's a real threat. You have a life-threatening illness, and no one needs to tell you it's scary. And so learning how to deal with that fear was a big part of my cancer journey. And from the very outset of my diagnosis, I'm a Christian. So, of course my faith was shaken, and I was just thinking like, God, why is this happening to me? I'm trying to live a good life and be a good moral person. And, I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a thief. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a rapist.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why am I the guy with cancer? And that was difficult. But of course, I didn't have an answer right away. But I did have God brought a verse to me, which was Romans 8:28, which says, "We know that God works all things for the good of those who love Him and who are called according to His purpose." And I just thought about
Mm.
that promise in Scripture, and I thought, okay, well, if I believe this, right? If I really believe this, if I really do believe that God's word is true, is that His promises are true, then He's going to work this for my good, right? I have to believe it. I choose to believe it. That's what faith is. It's choosing to believe. And so that gave me a lot of encouragement that in the midst of this terrible diagnosis, that a good thing would come out of it and that He would work it for my good. So anyway, so there I was, being pressured to do surgery and not knowing any different. And of course, I said, okay, yeah, I guess that's what I have to do. I don't know what else to do. And I trusted that the doctors had the best possible plan for me, and
Hmm.
went in on December 30th. So I was diagnosed right before Christmas, which was, bad timing.
Hmm.
And then I postponed the surgery. They were trying to get me in right away. And this is how cancer patients are treated. They're often rushed into treatment before they know what's happening to them. Within days, they've got appointments with multiple doctors and consultations, and you're getting scheduled for surgery or scheduled for a scan or scheduled for chemotherapy, right? Or scheduled for radiation. It's like it's a whirlwind, and you sort of lose control of your life and your power.
Hmm.
And so that's typical. In other cases, there's bungling. So in other cases, patients kind of slip through the cracks, and doctors forget to schedule them for the a scan or their next visit, and time goes by and nothing happens. So it can kind of go either way, but that can be a blessing in disguise because it gives you more time. But I just trust that God's timing is perfect. And so I went in for surgery on December 30th. They took out the tumor, which was along with a third of my large intestine. When I woke up, they said, "It's worse than we thought. You're stage 3C, which means that the cancer had spread to my lymph nodes."
Hmm.
They took out everything they could see, but I was told I needed nine to 12 months of chemotherapy, um, because stage 3 colon cancer is typically not cured by surgery. So, that was more bad news. And while I was in the hospital, two things happened. One was the very first meal that they served me after cutting out a third of my large intestine was a sloppy Joe. And I remember just them plopping this cafeteria tray in my lap with a sloppy Joe on it
Hmm.
and looking at it and just going,
Hmm.
I mean, I was on heavy pain medication, like the good stuff, right? But I was still just like, what is going on with this food? Like, why are they serving me this? This is like prison food, right? You can't get a sloppy Joe anywhere but prison or the military, maybe summer camp. So that was a little bit of a red flag. And then a few days later, I was told, "You get to go home today." And my surgeon came in to check on me, and I just happened to ask him a couple of questions. And I said, "Hey, is there any food I need to avoid?" And he said, "No, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer."
Hmm. Unreal.
Yeah. So that was it. Like that was all the dietary advice I got from my abdominal surgeon. And the underlying message there, which is pervasive in the medical community, because doctors have no training in nutrition or disease prevention or, natural holistic methods of healing, is they don't think what you eat matters. Doesn't matter what you eat. Go home and eat whatever you want. Who cares? We don't care. And patients are given permission to continue to live the lifestyle that contributed to their disease. They're not told that there are hundreds and hundreds, thousands really, of studies on nutrition and lifestyle for cancer survival and prevention. There's a huge body of research. And we know that 90% of cancers or more are not genetic. They're caused by diet, lifestyle, and environment. And that means that you actually have control. Your choices matter. Your choices make an impact on your whether you can your odds of getting cancer and your odds of survival if you get cancer. Your choices, your daily choices, have an impact on your life and your future. What a concept. Personal responsibility. Make good choices, you get good results. Make bad choices, not so good results, right? Bad results.
Totally.
So I didn't know any of this, but I was an entrepreneur. I was an independently minded person and independent thinker. And, there's things that didn't add up, that didn't make sense to me. And especially the fact that the medical community had no regard for nutrition. And the irony is that red meat is a group 1 human carcinogen. And that's the first meal they served me, especially colon cancer, red meat and colon cancer. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies red meat as a group 1 human carcinogen. There's the same level of evidence they have for asbestos and tobacco. So there's a lot of research that contributes to that conclusion. And then, of course, my surgeon says, don't lift anything heavier than a beer. Alcohol causes cancer, right? This is a known cause of cancer. So, and let me take a little rabbit trail here, because it's important to understand, like, if you want to decrease your risk of cancer, you need to remove the major contributors from your life. Or if you want to heal cancer, you need to remove their major contributors. Well, the major contributors is a diet that's high in red meat and processed meat, generally high in animal protein. The number 1 cause of cancer is tobacco. So smoking cigarettes, that's the number 1 cause still. The second leading cause is obesity. And that means when you're overweight or obese, I'm not body shaming, it's just a fact.
Sure.
It's a burden to your body. Being obese suppresses your immune system and promotes inflammation and creates a hormonal imbalance. And all of these factors together contribute to increasing your risk of cancer. So getting excess weight off is a huge step toward cancer prevention, reducing your risk. Stop smoking, lose excess weight. And then alcohol, being a major contributor, is stop drinking alcohol. The research on alcohol is just ramping up. And so it seems like, first it used to be like, well, no more than a few drinks per day. Now it's, well, no more than 1 drink per day. And then the latest is, even 1 drink per day increases your risk of cancer. So I would suggest that if someone is really serious about cancer prevention, that they don't drink, or that they drink occasionally, a few times a month. You're probably in the safe zone there if you have a few drinks a few times a month. But any more than that, again, daily drinking is increasing your risk. So I know people are probably listening, just being like, man, you're just Debbie Downer.
Yeah, totally.
Like, just all bad news. But it's okay. Like, it's your life. You make your own choices. I'm just telling you, this is what the evidence has shown us. I mean, this is what we know. If you really care to know what the scientific and medical research community has discovered, I'm telling you, this is it. So, and it's much easier to prevent cancer than it is to heal it. And so this is empowering, right? Because your choices really can produce health in the future and protect you. I wouldn't say you could ever be cancer proof, but you can put yourself in the lowest risk category, right? The lowest risk just by making these simple changes to your diet and lifestyle, eating a diet that's more centered around whole plant food, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, whole grains, legumes, like all these wonderful foods that God made for us, and staying away from processed food, fast food, and junk food, and eating too much animal food.
Mm.
And too much is 3 times a day. That's too much. Our ancestors didn't eat meat 3 times a day.
Sure.
They just didn't. Meat is, we have factory farms now.
Right.
So you can get meat 3 times a day, right? You can get it everywhere.
Yep.
It's everywhere.
Sure.
And our ancestors didn't have meat everywhere. They had to raise it and slaughter it, or they had to catch it and kill it.
Yep.
And so meat historically has always been a luxury food. It's always been a food for celebration, for special occasions, for feasts, not for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Right. I agree with you.
And so
I was going to ask you, Chris, real quick, just to slide this in there. Before you got cancer, were you this educated, or did you know nothing before you got cancer about what you're talking about now? Like, how well versed were you, and what was your diet like before you'd gotten the cancer?
I was a junk food connoisseur.
Sure. Okay. Good to know.
I ate whatever I wanted. I ate fast food constantly. I was busy. I was in real estate as an entrepreneur and building a business. I was eating on the run. So it was
Sure.
constantly fast food, processed food, junk food. I've always been thin. So I'd run through whatever, Wendy's drive through, double cheeseburger,
Oh, yeah.
supersized Dr. Pepper, large fries. I mean, I could just pound that stuff,
Right.
Eat
That's
a whole
most of
pizza.
America
Like,
right there. That's most of America.
yeah,
It is.
most of America. But the difference with me is like, I didn't gain weight.
Yeah, you look good still. Oh, that's amazing.
So I was thin. Like, it was like my metabolism is so high that I could just eat whatever. And so, yeah, so that's the way I ate. Now I would say I had a little sliver of education. I'd say more than the average American, because my mom was kind of always into healthy stuff, holistic kind of stuff. And she was a voracious reader. And so, like, she went to a chiropractor. So she took me to a chiropractor. Like, I went to the chiropractor growing up. So I kind of was exposed to that world, the holistic health world. I worked at Wild Oats when I was in college for a year, and Wild Oats got bought out by Whole Foods.
Right.
But it was the same store, So I worked at a natural health food grocery store. So I was, aware like of organic food and juicing and wheatgrass and stuff like that. Like, I knew what it was. But I wasn't committed to that lifestyle and wasn't eating that way, but I was definitely aware of it. So that, that was my background. I just had a little bit of like knowledge there, but not enough to be useful. So I got home from surgery, and, as I sobered up and got off the pain medication, I really started to think about my life and my future and what I wanted to do. And, the prospect of chemotherapy was frightening because I was extremely thin already. I was weak. I did not feel strong enough to do it. My instincts and intuition were telling me, like, this is not a good idea.
Wow.
The idea of poisoning my way back to health didn't make sense. And I had seen what chemotherapy does to people. I had seen advanced cancer patients who had gone through countless rounds of chemotherapy, and their bodies were just devastated, right, from the drugs. And I saw myself in that state. I could envision myself in that state. And that was, like I said, that was frightening. And so I had this dilemma. What am I going to do? And I prayed about it. My wife and I prayed together one day, and I just said, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, please show me. I don't know what to do. I trust you. And 2 days later, I got a book that was sent to me from a friend of my dad's who lives in Alaska. And that book was God's Way to Ultimate Health by George Malcolmus. And George had colon cancer back in the 1970s and was able to heal himself with the raw food diet and juicing. And no surgery, no chemo, no radiation. He just radically changed his diet. Got some good advice from a friend. He was a pastor, had another pastor friend give him some advice. And so he did it. And within a year, no tumor. He had healed. And I was just so inspired by his story. I just thought, you know what? If it worked for him, maybe it'll work for me. I'm doing it. And so overnight, I converted to a raw food diet, bought a juicer, and just started overdosing on fruits and vegetables. Now, I found a naturopathic doctor, and he connected me with an integrative oncologist. And I just kind of put together a little team, little support system to help me, navigate this part of my journey. And I decided against chemotherapy because God had opened this other path for me.
Right.
And I just knew, okay,
amazing.
I'm going to take this path and trust you, Lord, to get me to carry me through it. And it wasn't like I would never do chemo, but I just knew in that moment in time, I wanted to build my body up. I didn't want to break it down further. So I created a simple daily routine for myself. And just every day, I was juicing in the morning, making enough juice for the day, 64 ounces of carrot juice mostly, giant salads, fresh fruit, taking lots of herbs and supplements. Who knows if any of them helped, but I was taking lots of stuff just to give my body a little extra support, and really trusting God to lead me in the process. I mean, just that was the big thing. It really forced me to go deep in my faith and trust God to lead me and surrender, to repent of any sin in my life, to surrender to him, to trust him every day, to cast my cares on him. I mean, fear is a big problem in cancer. And I had to learn how to just, every time I would feel the fear, I would just stop and say, okay, God, I'm giving you my fear. I trust you. I'm not going to be afraid. Wow. And I'd practice gratitude, and I would just say, God, I thank you that you have given me a home and a wife who loves me, and enough money to afford to eat, enough money to pay my next set of bills, family that loves me. I thank you that I'm not in the hospital today, dying, that I can get out of bed and walk and talk and feed myself. I just started, counting my blessings. It's like all these things we take for granted in life. And they became so precious to me. And that's one of the blessings of cancer, is that it resets your perspective on life. And you realize what's really important. And the things that are really important, you can count on one hand. And all the other stuff that you cared about just stops mattering at all. It just doesn't matter. And there's an old expression that the healthy person cares about everything, and the sick person only cares about one thing. And that's getting well.
That's profound.
And so, and I had people, I had a reason to live. And this is really important. I call in my book, several of my books. My first book is called Chris Beat Cancer. My third book is called Beat Cancer Daily, which is a daily devotional. But in both of those books, I talk about the Beat Cancer mindset, which I adopted this mindset. And then I realized, as I interviewed many other cancer patients over the years, that they all had the same mindset too. And there's multiple components to the Beat Cancer mindset, but the first foundational component is you have to believe that healing is possible, right? You have to believe that healing is possible. And from there, that belief will propel you to action. It gives you hope, right? It gives you positivity and optimism, right? And then it leads you down a path of what I would say a successful or a success-oriented path. When you don't believe that healing is possible, you essentially become a victim. And this is what happens to cancer patients is they're victimized. They're told it's nothing you did that gave you cancer. There's nothing you can do to help yourself. You don't need to change your diet. No, it's not stress, right? It's no, you don't need to take supplements. You don't need to do anything but show up for treatment. And what that essentially tells the patient is you are powerless to help yourself. We are your only hope. Modern medicine, conventional medicine, we are your only hope. And so the patient goes home hopeless, helpless, discouraged, depressed, and desperate. And they also get this false sense of security that nothing they did could have contributed to their disease. It's a false belief, right? And so that is the disempowered, victimized patient right there. So believing you can get well is huge. And then being willing to do whatever it takes to get well, being willing to change your whole life. This is not the easy path. The easy path is changing nothing and just showing up for treatment.
Right.
That's the easy path. I'm not saying it isn't unpleasant, but it's easy, if you get my drift.
Sure.
The hard path is looking in the mirror and saying, I'm responsible for myself, for my life, and for my health, and for my future. And I've got to figure out why I got sick and what I can do to help myself recover. And I need to be willing to change my whole life. So that was the conversation I had with myself, right? And I was empowered by that. I realized that the way I was living was killing me. And that I had a sense that if I had contributed to my illness, that I could also contribute to my wellness. So those are important principles. And then from there, it's like once you're willing to change your whole life, you take responsibility for your health. You decide to enjoy the process, right? Just decide to treat it as an adventure.
Wow.
And a challenge, and to enjoy the process, and not to let regret and looking back and wishing, oh, my life was so much better before cancer. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And living in the past and in regret. And you can't do that. You have to look toward the future with hope. So anyway, that, all those things, all those sort of beliefs coalesce and empowered me just to take massive action to change my life and to stay on the healthy path. And you have to be very clear about living. Do you want to live? Yes or no? Because some cancer patients don't. Some cancer patients have a death wish. And the cancer diagnosis is the result of a very long life of difficulty. Sure. I've met a lot of cancer patients, and they had a very, very difficult life. And the cancer diagnosis is actually somewhat of a relief, right? It's a way out. And I don't fault anyone for that. I understand it. Sure. But it's important to ask yourself, do I want to live? Yes or no? And then answer yes or no. Just decide. If the answer is yes, then the next question you've got to ask yourself is, why? Who do you have to live for? What do you have to live for? And at that time, for me, I had 3 people that I had to live for. My wife, my mom, and my dad. I'm an only child. So those are the 3 most important people in my life. And I just thought, I cannot let these people put me in the ground. I cannot bear the thought of my mom and dad putting me in the ground. My wife, who I had been married to for 2 years and dated for 6 years before that. So we've been together 8 years, a third of our lives. I could not bear the thought of her putting me in the ground.
Yeah.
And it still gets me emotional just thinking about it now. And So I had a reason to live, right? I wanted to live and I had a reason to live. And that again was fuel that motivated me to do everything in my power to help myself survive. And so I did. I took massive action to change my life and created this simple daily routine that was, conducive to health and healing. And then I trusted God to lead me in the process. And I really got, raw with God and
Sure.
just again, like in a God uses sickness to get our attention. He uses difficulty and trials and tribulations to get our attention. God rescued the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. But part of that rescue plan was he had to take them through the wilderness before they, in order to get to the promised land, this amazing fertile territory, Canaan, they had to go through the wilderness, which was really difficult. And the purpose of the wilderness was to teach the Israelites to trust him, to obey him, and to trust him. Unfortunately, they failed. They didn't trust or obey, and they ended up spending a lot of time. The whole first generation died in the wilderness because they didn't learn. And so the wilderness is a picture. This is a picture of life for us, of difficulty for us. Like when you're going through these difficult wilderness times where things are hard, it teaches you to trust God to lead you through it. And if you really respond correctly, then you humble yourself and say, what do I need to change?
Sure.
Like, God, you've got my attention. I need your help. What do I need to change? What do I need to do? Like, lead me. I'm trusting you to lead me through this thing. I don't want to wander around in circles for 40 years, right? I need you. And I'm willing to surrender. And so that's what I did. I just surrendered and trusted him every day to lead me and provide for me and get me through the wilderness to the promised land, right? To health.
Yeah.
And he was faithful to me and I got there.
You got there. Some of the greatest people I've ever met that I really admire, and I admire you, but it's the people that figure out how to turn pain into purpose. They really land at a place where they're in mission, they're leaving a mark, they're helping humanity. And here you are, written 3 books, helping countless people that are going through the most difficult times ever, inspiring guys like me, really opening my mind up. Even just one person opened the mind up, but you're opening up so many minds, to really consider how they're living their lives right now and the consequences of those decisions and not taking personal responsibility. It's so profound for me, for you to hear sort of your deeper thoughts in connection with self-belief and getting through cancer because you have a reason to live. And there's so many healthy people right now that haven't got the bad diagnosis yet, but they're leaving terrible lives. And I just think this is profound, the conversation beyond cancer itself. So I admire people that have figured out how to find purpose out of pain. At some point, you're in real estate, you've got cancer, you've been exposed, God exposed you to a new path that you leached onto and you went all in on. Obviously, I have some questions really of that journey and how you started to transition into purpose, where now you have a mission to help people. I mean, there's obviously a transition period before. First, you got to heal yourself, which I'm super curious about. And then turning that into, which is really kind of the main point of our even having this podcast, is how people have transformed that into something that can help humanity. That's what we really want to inspire in other people. And that's why I love doing these interviews, is sort of hearing that conversion, where that happened for you. But I think practically speaking, the audience is, including myself, very interested in sort of the practical nature of how plants helped you heal cancer. If you don't mind just touching on that. Really interesting. There's so much diet talk, carnivore diet, the plant diet, all the things. For me personally, I'll just tell you, I settled on just the concept of whole foods, organic whole foods is sort of a lane I can live in. I only eat once a day. I believe in fasting heavily. I do long intermittent fast, or I long fast every month and I intermittent fast every day. I only do 1 meal a day. So this is the Eric that I kind of grew into myself with my own personal beliefs. And it seems to work for me just fine. I feel like I am thriving, but I am super curious to hear is the connection between plants and healing, and really that, that bigger connection of how meat really contributes to cancer. I think that might be a thing people hear and they maybe want to know a little bit more about, but just sort of the breakup of how this is something we could be applying regularly in our lives right now. I'm interested. And from there on to the purpose, if you don't mind, but I tease you up a little bit because you're great to just listen. I can listen to you all day. Just go. You're so good.
Well, the thing is, there are 100,000 nutritional science studies published every year.
Wow.
There's more than you can read, right? But in this vast just sea of research, there are a ton of studies on these unique anti-cancer compounds in food, specifically in fruits and vegetables, in plants. And so some of the most potent anti-cancer plants that are known are garlic, onions, and leeks. They're at the top. And then rounding out the top 10 would be mostly cruciferous vegetables: broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, bok choy. So it's really the salad vegetables, right?
Yeah.
And you can see behind me, I have a book called Beat Cancer Kitchen.
I see that, yeah.
And on the cover of it is the giant salad. And that's like what I ate every day for lunch and dinner, which is just, it's broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, onions, mushrooms, avocado, sprouted legumes, peppers, sauerkraut, apple cider vinegar, olive oil, and then spices like oregano, turmeric, cayenne pepper, garlic powder. And so it's just a very nutritionally dense anti-cancer meal. And and I talk about this in Chris Beat Cancer, the book, about I really go into the nutritional science, the anti-cancer science of food. And I hope your audience will read it because I think they'll learn a lot, and it'll really make them want to eat healthier. You'll want to once you. I found that, the best way to get someone to eat healthy is to get them excited about eating healthy, not to try to scare them away from junk food. That doesn't really work for in the long term, like sort of junk food guilt.
Sure.
But what works is when you learn how beneficial eating whole foods is for you, right? And once you start to do it and you feel differently, you feel better, then it sort of becomes self-fulfilling. Like it becomes sustainable because you like the way you feel. And maybe you start to look better. You like the way you look. And so yeah, that's just kind of touching on it. The most powerful anti-cancer fruit would be berries: blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, cherries. And then of course, every herb, every spice has unique anti-cancer nutrients in it. Like parsley is incredible because it has apigenin. Carrots have this unique anti-cancer compound called falcarinol, and oregano is awesome. Turmeric has, of course, curcumin, which most people have heard of, one of the most studied anti-cancer compounds. I mean, the drug companies have been studying curcumin for decades, trying to figure out how to make a drug that does the same things that curcumin does.
Right, of course.
So the goal is just to get all these compounds in your body circulating and just let them do what they do and let them assist your body and treat food as medicine. So like with juices, fresh vegetable juices, you're drinking juices throughout the day, and that's like taking medicine throughout the day.
Sure.
And just keeping those anti-cancer nutrients circulating in your bloodstream so your body can use them. So that's really the simple concept, and it really doesn't have to be complicated. It really is simple. Now, on the animal protein side, there's a lot of debate about this. And I get it. Humans love meat, right? We love to eat meat. It tastes good, right? Bacon, sausage, steaks, right? Fried chicken, whatever.
Sure.
Barbecue. But there's a number of ways that animal protein contributes to cancer growth. I mentioned earlier, there's a couple. And I misstated something earlier. I don't know why it came out wrong, but I said red meat is a group 1 human carcinogen. It's a group 2. Processed meat is a group 1.
Group 1. Okay.
So that would be bacon, sausage, ham, deli meats, pepperoni, like
the worst.
Hot dogs. So processed meat is a group 1. That's the highest level of evidence. Red meat is group 2, which means still a lot of evidence that they can cause cancer over a period of time, over, not after one meal, but usually it's after decades of eating high amounts. And the people who eat the highest amounts have the highest rates or risk of getting certain types of cancer typically colon, colorectal, also pancreatic. But then there's also a number of ways that animal protein can contribute to cancer growth if you already have cancer. And saturated fat contributes to cancer growth. Iron, heme iron, which is highly concentrated iron in animal foods, contributes to cancer growth. Animal protein raises IGF-1, which is a cancer growth promoting hormone in the body. When you cook animal food, you're creating these two carcinogenic compounds, heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And those are compounds that are created when animal flesh and fat is cooked at high heat. So typically grilling would, pan frying, that kind of thing. Boiling, not so much. So like cooking meat in a stew, it's actually the healthiest way to prepare meat versus cooking over high heat or an open flame. And then, of course, when you cook over an open flame, you're infusing the meat with like benzene, right? With carcinogenic compounds from...
what is causing the flame? I've always thought that. Like there's something burning. There's ash. If you think about it, if it's over an open flame or if it's from gasoline that's burning off, is that a toxic process? Yes. Yeah, it seems like it would be, right? Just logically speaking. Interesting.
Whether it's charcoal or it's natural gas or it's wood, you are infusing that meat with carcinogenic compounds.
100%. Yeah. Interesting.
And look, I get it. Like I love the taste of smoked barbecue.
And you used to be a meat eater.
Smoky. Yeah. I mean, right.
But yeah.
I was a barbecue connoisseur.
Yeah. What I like about your story is you actually cured your cancer without doing chemo. So it gives you a lot of validity to what you're saying. Because there are so many studies that I think people are like, you can make a case for anything these days. The carnivore people will cite a study and back and forth, all day, but you actually beat it. So it gives you a lot of strength in your voice.
Yeah. And, look, I've been accused of people have said, well, you didn't cure your cancer surgery. They cured it with surgery. Right. And so, and to those folks, I would say, look, all the doctors in my life told me surgery would not cure my cancer.
Everyone.
And a doctor recently confirmed that with me. So I had a genetic defect called Lynch syndrome, which if you have Lynch syndrome, it increases your risk of cancer, colon cancer typically. It's kind of like BRCA for breast cancer. And Lynch is, it's a genetic mismatch repair gene. So it turns out I had this. And that put me at a higher risk. It doesn't mean everyone that has this will get cancer, but you have a much higher risk, and even getting as a young adult. So I learned 20 years later that if I had done chemotherapy, it would not have helped me. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It would not have helped me because of this particular genetic,
and that's a fact,
abnormality.
That's a fact that it would not have helped you. Okay.
This is what my oncologist and an oncologist told me, based on the research that has emerged in the last 20 years. So
amazing.
Anyway, so that was actually a pretty cool confirmation that I made the right decision 20 years ago and that God was leading me. And so that's cool. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, look, I know my story inspires people, but there are so much better stories than mine. I've interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people who've healed all types and stages of cancer. And we all did basically the same things. We all ate juicing, tons of plant food, tons of raw plant food.
Did you fast?
Right? Yes. Fasting, definitely in there. Exercise, rebounding, fresh air, sunshine, forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is huge.
That's powerful.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And of course, abstaining from animal products, like really just cutting them way out of the diet completely, or just cutting way, way back on them. And so, yeah, there's a lot of diet and there's a lot of, dietary debates, but what's really important is you've got to look at the survivors. If you really want to understand, like, what is the best diet for cancer, you have to study the survivors who healed holistically.
I was going to ask is there any survivors that did a carnivore diet in cancer? Is that a thing? Because my friend Jessie Lee, who passed away, she was pretty famous. She really built a name for herself, and she had this public battle with her cancer. She decided to go out holistically, and her cancer markers were going down, and she ended up passing away. She went septic, and there's a debate of all around that, which I'm not going to get into. But a week before she passed away, her oncologist said, I don't need to see you for 6 months. You're doing so well. Your markers are down. The inflammation's gone. Your tumors are shrinking. The lymph nodes are shrinking. Everything was going the right day. And out of nowhere, she went septic, and she had these kidney stones, which was, I think, a byproduct of her vitamin C, high dose vitamin C injection she was getting as part of her treatment. And one of the issues with that was it created kidney stones. So we think that potentially, who knows, it probably didn't help that she had cancer, but it was such a win for people that are so consumed with food that, see, and, again, so it's always a different story, but I learned a lot from her in her journey. She was a carnivore going into that in her cancer, and she completely reverted to plants because she went to the best doctors in the world. She claims she found the best doctors in the world for beating cancer holistically, and all of them said, we need to get you on plants. She bought the best juicer money can buy. She was doing a celery juice, all the juice things constantly, and everything. She was thriving is what it felt like. Her story ended, it didn't, God had other plans for her, but the best doctors in the world that are in the holistic space, none of them were recommending meat as an option. And so she did switch. She saw the light there. But my question really is straightforward. Is there evidence of people healing from cancer once they have it through not doing this type of diet? And I don't know that I've ever heard that there is.
Yeah, well, there are a few stories that have popped up over the years of people claiming to heal with the carnivore diet. But then, what I've observed is that the story comes out or an interview comes out, and then in a short time later, they end up dying. So I've seen that a few times.
Interesting.
And you can still find these interviews and think, oh, this they're still alive. They're not.
Wow.
So are there maybe a few people out there? Yeah, maybe. Sure.
But this is
the vast majority. Yeah, I'm just going to say the vast majority of survivors I know and of the ones that I've interviewed, they all followed a plant-based diet.
Okay.
With lots of raw food and juicing. And so it's kind of like, look, if you want to climb Mount Everest, you don't want to just fly to Nepal tomorrow and just try to climb it.
No.
Right? You have to prepare yourself. There's a lot of preparation. There's reading, there's research. You need to study successful climbers. You need to learn from people who've done it so that you can have the best odds of success. This is a very dangerous task. Totally. You can die trying to climb Mount Everest, and people still die. And the same with cancer. Like, it is dangerous. You're trying to heal. You can die. And so it makes sense to study and learn from and follow the path that successful survivors have taken. And that's the well-worn path. Are there people that have climbed Mount Everest in some weird way that someone else didn't go? Sure. Right. But the best advice I can give is follow the well-established path.
Sure.
And so that's why I continue to interview people who've healed holistically, because every time, if you watch, again, there's more than you would ever watch now. There's so many that are on Chris Beat Cancer, the podcast and my website and YouTube channel. But if you just dig in and start watching, like, just the breast cancer survivors, for example, or pick a cancer, you will see the common threads. And that will give you an encouragement as a patient, right?
Totally.
That, okay, there's validity to this, even though there's never been a really great clinical trial, and there probably never will be because of the enormous cost, and there's no financial benefit to doing a trial like that, because at the end of the day, you spend hundreds of millions, millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions on this massive trial. You need to have a drug at the end of it that you can patent and sell.
Where's no money at the end of this rainbow? In this case, there wouldn't be.
Right. So it's like, we're hoping for a benevolent billionaire to come along and fund a trial like this for the good of humanity.
That'd be cool.
Then we could really, probably, prove something remarkable to
The
the
industry
world.
probably doesn't want this being heard. This doesn't pay, and that's why it's so elusive. Like it's even people that heal cancer, and they're really confident that we can heal you holistically. They don't want you saying that too loud. They don't want to be shut down. They're really afraid of the attacks that are going to come. I've heard of a lot of great stories of people beating cancer holistically too, and then the place that helped them magically gets bought up by some random company and then it gets shut down immediately. I've heard a lot of funny stories like this around this topic. I wanted to ask you one other question. Is talked about really the connection of meat. What about sugar? Like, I think a lot of people are wondering, like, is there a deep-seated connection between cancer and sugar, or is it only bad when cancer arrives that then sugar becomes so dangerous, or is sugar just as dangerous as alcohol and meat?
There's a reductionist expression: sugar feeds cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a half truth. Sugar feeds every cell in your body, right? Every cell in your body runs on glucose. Everything you eat is converted to glucose, whether you're eating an apple or a steak, right? Animal protein is converted into glucose by the liver. It's called gluconeogenesis. So your cells want glucose. They want it. They love it.
Sure.
They use it. It's clean burning fuel. So sugar, yes, sugar feeds cancer cells, but it feeds every cell. Now, tumors have a rapid uptake of sugar. So they uptake sugar faster than normal cells. And so when you do a PET scan, they give you this injection of glucose, and then the tumor cells, tumors or lesions, or sometimes just infections that are not cancer, will light up on the scan because of the radioactive glucose. So again, that kind of fueled this idea, oh, sugar feeds cancer. See, that's proof. But there have been subsequent studies that have found that there's a number of different types of cells inside a tumor. And a tumor is not just 100% cancer cells. There's immune cells in there too. And what researchers at Vanderbilt found just a couple of years ago is that the cells in the tumor that consume the most sugar are actually immune cells. The cancer cells in the tumor preferred glutamine to glucose.
Interesting.
Glutamine is an amino acid that's found in
meat,
protein, right? Animal protein. So cancer cells like sugar, but guess what? They use protein for fuel and they use fat for fuel.
Sure.
So trying to, explain this in the shortest way possible.
Right.
The answer is, don't eat refined sugar, don't eat corn syrup, right? But you shouldn't be afraid of the sugars that are naturally occurring in fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, like in a berry. Okay. It's good.
Because because when you eat those foods, one, the sweetness is delightful, right? You enjoy it. Your mouth enjoys it. Your brain enjoys it. It's delightful to eat, sweet, natural foods. But secondly, you're getting a whole food matrix. So you're getting all these vitamins, minerals, enzymes, antioxidants, all these wonderful anti-cancer compounds from that piece of food. And the sugar is just the way in, so the sugar might tell a cancer cell or a tumor like, oh, here comes sugar, and it opens up, but then it gets a dose of, falcarinol, for example, if you're drinking carrot juice, or beta carotene or whatever. So yeah, it's all those other nutrients that are so much more important and outweigh whatever sort of negative possible aspect sugar would have in your body in regards to cancer growth.
Chris, I know we're coming up a hard stop here, but I wanted to really, just for the audience sake, kind of get to the place where you knew you beat your cancer and really where the Chris we know today started to emerge. When was that moment when you actually realized, shit, I'm beating this? And then when was the actual moment when you could justify and say out loud to the world, I beat cancer?
Well, it's funny. You asked this earlier and then we kind of rabbit trailed off of it. But how did this turn into my mission really is the question, right?
Yeah.
And about 6 years, 5 years after my diagnosis, I had a follow-up scan and I was cancer-free.
Wow.
And so up until that point, 5 years. But up until that point, I was definitely feeling better and optimistic and healthy and all that kind of stuff. And I'd say once I hit the 2-year scan, that really felt like a milestone.
Yeah.
And then of course the 5-year mark was like,
at that
point, my oncologist was like, man, you're out of the woods. So that was a really good, really, really good feeling. And then over the next year, I just, look, I didn't want to talk about cancer. I didn't want to think about it. I
Sure.
wanted to just continue on with my life. I was in real estate and I
Yeah.
was a musician and playing in bands and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to do. And I had a young family, but I just had this sort of nagging, the Holy Spirit, I guess, tugging on
Totally.
me, and that I needed to share my story. And I didn't really know how to do it. I didn't want to write a book, or, I didn't really know what to do, but I just had this nagging sense that I needed to share my story and that there were people that needed encouragement and hope. And so I got the idea, just, okay, I'll start a blog called, I'll call it Chris Beat Cancer. And that was in 2010. And I had a buddy who helped me. I was like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, how do I, and he's like, here, go to WordPress, like sign up.
For sure. Yeah.
I'll help you, I'll help you create a little website. And so, so I just set it up and started writing articles about my experience, what I did, what I've learned, started making videos for YouTube, teaching what I learned. Then I started meeting other people who had healed like me and interviewing them. And then I started interviewing other doctors and experts. And so it was a passion, right? This was a part-time passion for me. And, but over doing it over the course of 5 years, it just grew and grew and grew. And it became my mission.
Yeah.
And so again, I didn't have a grand vision or plan or anything. I just thought, this is important and I need to do it. And I'm getting feedback that it's really helping people. Of course, people reaching out to me, I'm coaching them. I started coaching people one-on-one, and then that grew into me creating a coaching program because I couldn't talk to as many people as wanted to talk to me. Just my audience got pretty big over the years. And so, it just is one of those things. It was like, this is what I'm meant to do. And it became clear over time. And around the 5-year mark, I was like, okay, I need to get out of real estate. I need to focus on this full time. This really needs to be my full-time passion. And I don't need to be distracted by anything else.
Sure.
And then, and so that's when I decided to write my first book and really get serious about it. So Chris Beat Cancer, that book was published in 2018. 2015 is when I decided, okay, I'm really going to focus on this full time. 2018, Chris Beat Cancer came out. And then in 2020 and 2021, we published Beat Cancer Kitchen, which is a plant-based cookbook, and then Beat Cancer Daily, which is a daily devotional. And I created a coaching program during that time too. And that's called Square One. Mm-hmm. So a couple resources just to share with your audience. If you have cancer, I've got a free guide called 20 Questions for Your Oncologist. And it's on chrisbeatcancer.com. There's a link to it on every page of my website. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or you could just go to chrisbeatcancer.com/20. And that will give you the right questions to ask, because patients are not asking the right questions. They don't get enough information from their doctors. They're led into treatment out of fear and ignorance. And if you ask the right questions, you will make a much better decision about your treatment options.
Amazing.
We have lots of people that are in our community that do chemo, and we just love them and encourage them and support them. Like, I'm not here to tell anybody not to do chemotherapy, but if you read Chris Beat Cancer, the book, you will be empowered and understand there's a lot of corruption in the cancer and medical and pharmaceutical industries. And many of these cancer studies and statistics are exaggerated. And the effectiveness of treatments is greatly exaggerated. And so again, asking the right questions, reading my first book or going through the 20 questions guide will empower you. You will get a deep understanding of how the industry works. And then you can ask the right questions and get the right answers and make a good decision for you. So that's a big resource right there. And then of course, my books are on Amazon, and most bookstores have them or can order them if you want to support your local bookstore. And then we have a coaching program that you can find at chrisbeatcancer.com if you click on the coaching link.
Wow. Chris, you're an amazing resource. We have an audience that's growing every day. So this would be really neat to share you with our audience. thank you for what you do, man. It's incredible to
Thank
see
you.
people that have stepped into their purpose and into the light and have somehow tried to figure out how to become someone that can turn their problem they had, the pain they had, the struggle they had into something that can help humanity. And you were definitely a prime example of someone that's really living in a beautiful purpose. God, I love it. So thank you for what you do, brother. It's very cool.
Well, I got to say, yeah, the Lord led me, man. You know, I just have to give credit to God. He really led me through. I didn't choose cancer. I didn't really want to be doing what I'm doing now, but he just led me into it, you know, and he's blessed me, and I'm just so thankful. And I want to just end with one encouragement. I didn't get into this, but I talk about this in my book a lot.
Okay.
It's just how powerful forgiveness is, and how destructive unforgiveness, bitterness, anger, and resentment are. I mean, these are toxic emotions that will wreck your health.
Yeah.
They will ruin your life. And one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself is to forgive every person who has ever hurt you.
Forgive.
To let them go, give them to God. Just say, God, I forgive them. They're all yours.
Yeah.
I'm not going to carry this.
What freedom it must feel like to let those handcuffs go. That weight.
That's right. You are releasing yourself from a prison of pain.
Yeah.
Right. The key, you got the key, right? The key is forgiveness, and you can reach around and unlock the prison door.
So good.
Right. Unlock the cell door and let yourself out through forgiveness. It is freedom.
Powerful.
And spiritual freedom, emotional, mental, and physical freedom. And again, I mean, we're out of time, but I just want your audience to know this is one of the most important things I did and that I continue to practice today. And if you want to dig into that more, I talk about it a lot in my book, Chris Beat Cancer.
One last time, shoot us your website and where they can find you on Instagram. One last time.
chrisbeatcancer.com. And my social media handles are Chris Beat Cancer.
Easy. Awesome. Hey, well, thank you so much, Chris, for doing this. And audience, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Eric.
If you enjoyed, thank you. If you enjoyed the show, please like, follow, subscribe to Man on a Mission. Go follow Chris. Chris is an amazing human doing God's work here on earth. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.